and welcome to my channel, Olushola Live. My name is Olushola Taiwo, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to the channel if you like anything that you see at all. Feel free to leave comments. It's an honor to have you view, and I welcome you to Chapter 4 of Our Mother's Sore Expectations by my beloved cousin, Kehinde Adeola Ayeni. Today we're going to continue on page 82. All right? Teju in 1977 had been an apprentice to the wealthy trader for about a year. Ireti as a toddler was a delightful little girl whom she took with her wherever she went. Ireti was good for her mother. Maternity had a significant calming effect on Teju, and she seemed content to take care of her daughter and to go to the market every day. Her family, as characteristic of them, embraced and loved Ireti as they had loved her mother, and her uncles doted on her. The principal was not left out. The little girl became the light of his life. He went to the Bankole's house every day to see her and to spend time with her. He had continued to ask Teju to marry him until Ireti was 6 months old, when she explained to him the reasons why she would not marry him. I have the same kind of love, affection, and respect that I have for my father and brothers for you, and you are very dear to me. It was a childish impulse on my part that made me seduce you the day Ireti was conceived, and I was terrified when I found out that I was pregnant. That had been the first and only time that I have really been afraid in my life. But on seeing the joy that Ireti has brought to your life, I am glad that I did it. It is time for you to move on with your life. You have Ireti, and she is a precious child, who we will both share together for the rest of our lives. Start to date other women. I am sure a lot of them will like to be in relationship with you because you are a great person. The principal took her advice and stopped proposing to her. He continued to come to their house in the evenings to spend time with his daughter, and when she was old enough to be separated from her mother for periods of time, he would take her with him to spend the night. Ireti knew that he was her father, and with her first few words started to address him as father. He also started a relationship with a woman college professor from the university in Ibadan. They would see each other when she either drove the 40 miles to Iroko or when he went to Ibadan, and occasionally, with Teju's consent, would take Ireti with him. Teju's brothers were all doing well in their individual lives. One after the other, they married and settled and started families of their own. Teju graduated from her apprenticeship and followed her parents and brothers and allowed her parents and brothers contribute money to start her in business. She decided she would sell fabrics in bales, fabrics that were made locally like Ankara, Ashoke, and Adire. She started to travel to different parts of Yoruba land to buy these from the people who made them in the many villages and towns at a distance from the major cities. She sold these fabrics to other tailors who would resell them, or to other traders who would resell them, or to tailors, and sometimes to customers who brought them to have them made into dresses. She became a major distributor for these many villagers who worked hard at making these fabrics and thus made it possible for them to sell their commodities in profitable ways. Her mother suggested she might want to invest in selling lace, brocade, and damask, which were fabrics usually imported from Europe, but she refused. Even though she would make a lot more profit by selling these clothes, which were usually very expensive and were worn by people for special occasions like weddings, funerals, and other important events, she felt that the locally made fabrics of equally good quality should be promoted. Although many people, especially in the middle and upper classes, considered it a sign of prestige and sophistication to wear imported fabrics. Whenever customers came to her shop and asked her if she sold European fabrics, she would show them the beautifully hand-woven local fabrics that she had in stock. These fabrics are ours, made with pride by our people who are willing to design and weave these clothes for you to your specifications as to color and patterns. Why spend your money buying fabrics made in Holland by people who are not your kind and don't care about you but care only for your money? She would ask the customers what they planned to use the fabrics for, and whenever they told her that it was for a wedding or birthday ceremony, she would ask them for their color scheme. She would promise them that if they bought the locally made fabrics, they could ask for any color combination, designs, patterns, if it was to match their shoes or bags or jewelry, and that she would order the clothes for them. Her best friend Kike at this time was at the university in Lagos, studying to become a medical doctor. Kike loved clothes and was always well dressed and would look very sharp, but most of her clothes were made in England or the United States. Teju worked on her friend. She ordered special fabrics for her from the cloth weavers. She had them sewn and sent to her in Lagos. They were all very beautiful, and Kike complimented the clothes more with her beauty. She soon abandoned wearing the imported clothes because the locally made clothes looked much better on her. Each time she wore a new batch from Teju, her female classmates would admire her fashion. They would ask her where she got her clothes made and wondered if they could have clothes made by her tailors as well. Kike would gratefully tell her friends about the reactions to her new fashion, and each time Teju told her that the clothes were specifically made for her and had taken her African woman's shape into consideration. Unlike the clothes from abroad that were designed by Caucasian women whose body configurations were different from Africans. Very soon, Teju was able to influence many women into buying from her, and with her lectures to them on the value of wearing clothes that were ours and taking pride in it, and Kike's modeling of the clothes for her in the university in Lagos, her business started to do well. Kike's friends started to order clothes from her as well, so she employed tailors to make the clothes for them. She designed the styles, the patterns, and the colors on the fabrics, ensuring that it reflected the personality of the person who ordered them. Her customers were very satisfied. Within 2 years, it was fashionable amongst a lot of Yoruba people to wear clothes made from Ankara Ashoke or Adire, and other traders started to follow her footsteps and sell only these fabrics. Teju had a shop in the open market in a section where clothes were sold, and she soon developed very close friendships with a lot of women who were her neighbors. They shared events with one another, like the births of their children, positive accomplishments of each other's family members, as well as sorrowful events. They counseled and advised one another when the need arose and protected each other's interests. Teju's neighbor to the left was a woman in her mid-30s who was known as Mama Ade. She also sold fabrics, and she and Teju would converse with one another from time to time. Sometimes in 1980, about 3 years after they became neighbors, Teju noticed that her stock was declining in size, and more often than not, Mama Ade would send customers to her for them to buy what they needed. Whenever Teju tried to return the favor by referring customers to her, if she did not have what they were looking for, Mama Ade never had it. Teju started to pay closer attention to her. She noticed that she always looked tired, and sometimes she would open her shop late and close early. What she knew of her was that she had been widowed in the past 5 years. Teju had known the husband like everybody knew everybody in their small town. He had been much older than Mama Ade and died of some protracted illness. They had 4 children, all of whom were teenagers. Mama Ade remarried about 4 months before to a man who recently moved to Iroko. People did not know much about him. Mama Ade had met him on one of her trips to Lagos to buy lace and damask. The new husband opened the first bar in Iroko. Many of the local people were not happy about the development, as it was feared that men would spend their money there instead of using the earnings to take care of their families. Iroko had always prided itself on being a respectable town with law-abiding citizens, and the bar was seen as a thing for big cities. The man was known in the town as Mr. I Go Get 'Am For You. Not many people, including Teju, knew his real name. She had had very little to do with him because she found him repulsive. 1 month before this time, he had come to the shop to see his wife, and she introduced him to Teju, who developed an instant distaste for him without really knowing why. He was not an ugly man by any means, but he had made her skin crawl. He had reacted to her the same way many men react to her. He had not been able to take his eyes off of her. She ignored him and had continued to mind her business. He returned the following day at a time that his wife, who had been late in opening her shop, was not there, and simply asked Teju to sleep with him. She calmly declined and continued what she was doing. "I will make it worth your while," he said to her back, which she had turned on him. "You know what my name is. My friends call me I go get 'em for you, and that is a name I earned. I will get anything you want for you, and nobody says no to me." Teju turned her back to him and asked him if he was threatening her. His reply was, "I am not threatening you. I am just letting you know some things about me. One of them is that I always get what I want. And like I said, I want to sleep with you, and I will sleep with you. It is up to you to come to me of your own free will, but I will sleep with you." Teju had decided at that point that there was no point in answering him. "I will be back," he promised her before he left. Teju had dismissed him from her mind after that because other matters had preoccupied her. There seemed to be a mafia organization in town. A lot of women's shops had been broken into, but it had been mostly in other parts of the market, primarily amongst the women selling hardware and food items. Sacks of rice, salt, sugar, and other food items, as well as planks of wood and tools, had been stolen. The police were contacted, but they had not been able to solve the crime, and the rate of the robberies were increasing. The women called a meeting of their association to discuss the matter. They were convinced that the police was not doing enough to help take care of the situation. Iroko had never experienced anything like that before. It had always been a peaceful community where you could trust your neighbor and leave your door unlocked. Everybody was worried, as it meant that the town was losing its comfortable small town feel. About 2 weeks after the wave of robberies started, some young men started to approach many of the market women, offering them protection from the robbers. But the women would have to pay them a retainer's fee on a regular basis, and the agreement was that their shops would be safe from the robbers. The women did not want this. They knew that it was the kind of thing that happened in the markets in the big cities like Lagos and Ibadan. Teju was conversant with these developments, and she, like the other women, was worried. They also knew that it was the young men asking them for protection money who were the thieves. So on this day, with this on her mind, she left her shop and walked to the shop across from hers to speak with the owner, who was friendlier with Mama Ade. She expressed concern about her neighbor's welfare and wondered with the other woman what could be going on with her. The other woman, called Mama Yabo, thanked Teju for her concern. Mama Iritsi, she addressed Teju as a lot of people in the market did, calling her by her daughter's name. "Ever since she married that good-for-nothing man, my friend's life has taken a turn for the worst. He takes her money, and whenever she complains or refuses, he beats her. That is why she hasn't been coming to the market to take care of her business. I warned her at the time that she started to follow the idiot. He is from a faraway place. We do not know of him. We don't know his people, and we can't check his character." But she did not listen to me. Ever since Baba Ade died, may God make the ground soft for him. She made a sign of the cross with her right hand after speaking of the dead man. "My friend seems to have lost her mind and her common sense. This man beats her all the time." She paused, and dragging Teju into the shop with her, out of earshot of passers-by, she whispered to her, "He rapes her 14-year-old daughter too." She stopped talking, had a horrified look on her face, and clasped her hands over her breasts, watching Teju's face for her reaction. And Teju was horrified. "My friend knows because her daughter told her. He rapes the girl almost every night. He gets home in the wee hours of the morning drunk. He would wake the whole lot of them, ask them to form a line. He would ask my friend and my daughter to take off their underwear, and he would sniff them. Is he a dog? He is trying to find out if they have been sleeping around," he told them. "He does this every day, and every day he accuses them of sleeping around. Sometimes he would urinate on their feet in the living room. I have never seen or heard anything like this in my life. Oh, she exclaimed, and clapped her hands together twice in despair. He threatened the poor child that he would kill her and her brothers and mother if she doesn't cooperate with him, or if she tells a soul that he has been sleeping with her. Anyway, that frightened child must have had enough, because she asked my daughter for money and told my daughter that she was running away from home. She would go to her father's sister in Kano. I gave my daughter the money and she gave it to her. She ran away this morning. That is why Mama Ade hasn't come in today. She's busy looking for her daughter. Of course, she came to my house, woke me up at 6 this morning, and asked me if I knew where her daughter was, and I told her that I didn't. She is my very good friend, and God knows that I love her. But I think she has lost her mind, and I am afraid that if I told her, she would go after the child and bring her back here, so that that son of a devil can continue to sleep with her. Please, Mama Iritsi, you have a daughter yourself, and I know you wouldn't want this kind of thing to happen to your child. Do not tell her all the things that I just told you, she begged Teju. Teju looked at Mama Yabo, and she was nauseated at the man who would rape a 14-year-old. She confirmed her feelings about the man, and without really knowing why, she developed the intuition that he was behind the robbery in the market. We have to get that man out of this town by all means possible, she told Mama Yabo. This is a good town full of good people. We don't want people like him amongst us. You are right. I have a daughter. This is my home, and I don't want to raise my daughter in this town with people like him around. Now it is the robbery. Very soon it will be rape and kidnap. We will all soon be afraid to let our children play in the streets. This is a small place. It is not like Lagos or Ibadan, and we want to keep it that way. Mama Yabo looked relieved, hugged her, and told her that she agreed with her. What are we going to do? She asked Teju, who replied that she would think about it for a while. She thought about it for a week, which was a long while for her because she was an impatient person. She told her parents and the principal about it, and their reaction was one of sorrow that their town was becoming like the big cities. Teju was very worried. She had grown up in Iroko, and to her it was the best place on earth. She remembered the joys of growing up, cartwheeling, and running freely through the town, even if it had been a little bit wildly. She remembered the thrills of climbing trees with her brothers, swimming in the rivers and lakes, sneaking out of the house at night to hang out with her best friend, and walking home from parties at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning without any concern or worries. She wanted her daughter to grow up with such freedom and security. Most of the crime in the town had been an occasional robbery by the high school students in the boarding house, most of whom had been from out of town, and usually the punishments had been expulsion from the school. An occasional husband had beaten his wife and had been promptly arrested by the police and locked up till they felt that he had been punished enough, or the wife came begging for his relief. They had a chief of police who had been raised by his single mother, and he had watched his own father get drunk and beat his mother many times. The father eventually drank himself to death, so the chief could not condone the behavior and always punished such wife beaters mercilessly. Theirs was a good town, and they felt they should keep it that way, was Teju's conclusion, and she resolved in her mind to do all she could to get "I go get 'em for you" out. He actually forced her hand a few days later, when 2 of the young men who had been going around harassing the market women into retaining them for protection walked into her shop with the same proposition. Teju knew one of them very well. He had been in the same classes with her, but he had not continued with his education after primary school. Rather, he had been loafing around town doing nothing. She had also remembered that while they were in school, he, at the age of 7, 8, or 9 years, would change his grades on his report cards. He always failed all the classes, and his illiterate parents had not known anything better. He would tell them that he got B's when he got F's. Teju did not beat about the bush with him. "Why are you stealing from us?" she asked them. They told her that they were not the robbers, but rather they were offering people protection from the robbers, and Teju would do well by retaining them. "Why are you bringing mafia to this town?" she asked them. While she fixed her huge eyes on her former classmate, the two men, feigning ignorance, told her that they had no idea what she was talking about. "That monster, I go get him for you, is your boss, isn't he?" she asked them again. They were quiet. "Go and tell him that he has to leave town and take all of you with him. We don't want you in this town, and I'm going to let the police know that you and him are the robbers," she calmly told the two men. Without her anticipating it, her former classmate pushed her into the shop from the door where they had been talking, brought out a knife and put it to her neck, promised her that he would kill her. Teju was enraged. She pushed his hand from her neck. She asked him to get out of her shop, and if he knew what was good for him, to get out of town too, and that he should take his gang with him. He equally got angry and humiliated, especially since it was Teju threatening him, and also remembering that she had always looked down on him and had called him a common criminal once they were in school together. He moved towards her with a determination to stab her with the knife, when Mama Yabo from the shop across, who had been observing all that had been going on, started to scream for help on the top of her lungs. A lot of their neighbors ran to Teju's shop, and the men, seeing all the women rushing at them, ran out through the back door. The women fussed over Teju and asked her repeatedly if she was okay. She assured them that she was fine. They stood around and lamented their plight and wondered at what the world was coming to. If even though you worked hard at your trade, you still had to pay some people so that they would not steal from you. They resolved that they had to join together and fight the gang. Although they did not know how they were going to go about it, they decided that they would call an emergency meeting of their association. They returned to their shops, closed for the time being, and telling one another about the emergency meeting, convened in front of the president of their association's shop. When the president, an elderly woman who ran a shop in the market for some 40 years, called the impromptu meeting to order, Teju stood on a makeshift platform to address the women. "My mothers, aunties, and sisters, I greet all of you today with a heavy heart. We are all mothers, one way or the other. Even those of us who haven't been blessed with the gift of a baby bruising our wombs have the pleasure and the responsibility of taking care of adopted children or children of brothers and sisters." All the women murmured their agreements to her introduction. "We wake up every day and come to the market to sell our wares. We travel far and wide to purchase our merchandise and sell them to people in this town and neighboring towns and villages. When our fellow sisters in the farms and villages work hard at growing their crops or in the other things that they make and produce, they bring them to us with the trust that we will help to sell them. A lot of people travel from big cities to buy from us. Those of us who sell food products are responsible for feeding a significant portion of Yoruba land. We are here from dawn to dusk, and when we leave here, we still go home to be mothers and wives. Now some riffraff are saying to us that they have come to take our town from us, that the products of our labor belong to them, and that they will take it from us whether we like it or not. They are telling us that they will not allow us to fulfill all these important functions anymore. They are telling us that our children cannot swim freely in our rivers and lakes. They are telling us that our children cannot play anymore on our streets. They are telling us that Iroko will no longer be known as a safe place for all those important people in Lagos and Ibadan to send their children for high school education, a thing we are very proud of. They are telling us they will lure our children out of classrooms and make them join gangs of armed robbers. They are telling us that all our hard work and toil will be for naught, and that all the dreams and hopes that we have for our children, we will not be able to realize them. They are telling us all these things. Are we going to listen to them and be afraid and allow them to dictate to us? Or are we going to take our town and streets back from them? She paused, and the women started to talk and chant and sing that they would not give in to the evil people. Teju shouted over their voices and continued, "This morning, 2 of the people who have been stealing from us approached me and offered me what most of you have been offered. I confronted them and I accused them of being the robbers, and they confirmed my suspicions by their actions. Their boss is the man without a name who calls himself I go get am for you. They threatened to kill me and drew a knife on me and put it to my neck. Many of you ran to my defense and saved me today. This is what our town has become. We have to do something about them. At least now we know who our enemies are." She concluded her speech, and thanking the women for listening to her, she climbed down from the platform. The women mumbled and clapped their hands in appreciation of her. The president climbed onto the platform and thanked Teju on behalf of all the market women. "We have always known you to be a fearless woman, Mama Ireti," she began. "Thank you very much for all you said to us today. We cannot let these people take our town from us. Iroko is just too important, and we have been blessed with a lot of good people. We are going to run these people out of town. I have been selling my merchandise in this market for 45 years now, and it has grown to a market with over 400 women. We cannot give in to this harassment and intimidation. I have seen a lot in my days, and I know that our fellow sisters in other places have had to contend with these kinds of nonsense. They didn't fight back when this was introduced to them. We live in a very corrupt country. The people in government force themselves on us and steal our money. The 400 of us here today don't have the power to overthrow the people in Lagos. But like the saying goes, we bring treasures from home. We have the power to stop these ones in our home and throw them out. We will all march to the police station and speak with the chief of police, and then we will all march to the king's palace and speak with him. If they don't work with us, the markets will be closed until they do." The women met her speech with loud, consenting applause, and they started to march to the police station. When they arrived at the police station, the chief of police wanted to know if they had evidence that it was the men who they were accusing who had committed the crimes. "We can't just go around accusing people without evidence. Every man is innocent in the eyes of the law until proven otherwise, and you need concrete proof, not just gut feelings. It is a very serious matter to accuse innocent people of committing crimes you didn't catch them at," he educated the women. Teju told the chief the event of the morning at her shop and that the men threatened to kill her. The chief of police gave her a condescending look. He said to her, "Teju, you have always allowed your imagination run away with you. I have known you all your life, and you do have a lot of enemies in this town. Perhaps the man was angry with you because you wouldn't sleep with him. We all know your reputation of sleeping around." He chuckled to himself. Teju went ballistic. The women were taken aback as well. But what the policeman said had a lot of truth in it, some thought, while many of them felt that it was not the point of the visit to the police station. "I am surprised at you," Teju yelled at the policeman. "This is not the point of our visit today." "Excuse me. If I have slept with many men, it is none of your damn business, but mine. I will not stand for you to patronize me. Why don't you mind your own business and do the work that you are hired and paid to do? And that is to catch the thieves and put an end to the robbery. I think you are in it with them. You are a man I have always respected. I think the way you have kept law and order in this town, and even though the police force in other parts of the country have gone to the dogs, you have always done a good job here. But you know what? I lose every ounce of that respect for you as I stand here today. How dare you deride me and this serious issue that we are trying to discuss with you? You have, wow. How dare you protect a thief and a child rapist? You think it's funny? You have become corrupt, haven't you? She stood across from the police chief with her hands on her hips. Her eyes were blazing with anger. The women gasped when she mentioned child rapists, and they turned to the chief and started to chant for him to do something. Teju continued, and she told them that the missing child, Mama Ade's daughter, ran away from home because the man without a name who calls himself I go get am for you has been raping the 14-year-old child. The chants increased in intensity, and the women started to curse at the policeman. They threatened him that if he did not arrest I go get am for you immediately, they would burn him to death. He is a rapist. Are you not a father of daughters? They asked him. How he could allow a child rapist work freely amongst them. The chief was suddenly afraid that the meeting might deteriorate into a riot, so he promised the women that he would have the identified men arrested immediately. The president of the Market Women Association spoke for the first time. She told the policemen that they were on their way to the palace to table their grievances with the king. On their return, they would pass by the police station to be sure that the men were in custody. The chief of police assured them that the men would be in custody by then. The women left and continued their march to the palace. The king of the town, Oluiroko, had been on the throne for the past 50 years, and he promptly gave them audience. The women went to him as a gesture of respect. They knew that he did not have the authority to arrest or imprison anyone. The kings of the many towns lost such powers when the arrival of the white man, but they were still the spiritual heads of the communities and fathers to everybody, so their subjects had continued to go to them with every problem under the sun, and more often than not, all they were able to do was appeal to the government or intercede for their people. He listened to Teju as she relayed the events of the day, including the visit to the police station and the chief of police's reply. She did not omit any details. Oluiroko loved Teju. She had grown up under his watchful eyes, as she had spent almost all of her childhood in the palace with him and her grandfather. He loved her passionate spirit and her eyes that always looked like they had fire in them. He respected her honesty. He knew how challenging raising Teju had been for her parents. Her grandfather, very proud of her, talked about her all the time. He stood up from his throne and came toward the women, all of whom were on their knees as a sign of respect for him. My mothers, I thank you for coming to me today with your heavy hearts. Please get up from your knees. I am your servant, and you are my mothers. Don't kneel down to me. I am sorry that we have not protected you enough and have allowed these kinds of undesirable elements amongst us. You have all put your trust in me, and I have served you for 50 years. It has been a pleasure and an honor to be Oluiroko. This town has been a place that has blessed my reign, and it is due to your hard work, my mothers. I shall do everything in my power to take care of this serious matter. He turned to their president and had addressed her. My mother, you have been helping me by taking care of your daughters in the market for these so many years, and I thank you. I beg all of you to please go back and open your shops so people can buy food and all the things they need to take care of themselves. And you have my word, I will take care of this serious problem. He bowed to them, and the women responded by going down on their knees one more time. And addressing him, they all chanted, Kábíyèsí Oluiroko, Kádé pẹ́ lórí, kí bàtà pẹ́ lẹ́sẹ̀, wishing him a long life and wisdom to continue to reign. They left, and outside of the palace, they turned to their president and asked her what she wanted to do. Should they reopen their shops for business as the king asked them to, or should they go home? The president asked them to go back to their shops. The women obeyed and dispersed. The officials of the Market Women Association stayed behind, and when Teju made to leave with her neighbors to go to her shop, the president asked her to remain. She did, and they walked to the police station. The chief of police was not there. When the women demanded to see him, the officer at the desk told them that he had left for Ibadan to visit with his brother. The women were angry. Visit with his brother, they asked the officer. And he told them it was a trip he had planned earlier on that day, but that their protest had delayed him. Teju asked the officer if he was on vacation because it was a weekday and he should be at his post. This was why he earned a salary. The officer said he was not on vacation and that he had planned to return later in the day. Have the men been arrested? Teju asked the officer, and he told her that the chief did not give them instruction to arrest anyone. We have a mafia in town, and he has been bought, Teju announced to the women. She felt very sad. She started to leave with plans to return to her shop when the president told her and the other women that they should give the chief of the police and the king until the following day to take actions, and if they did not, they would go on strike. Teju nodded her head and walked to her shop. She felt sadness about the chief of police. He used to be a good man and one with outstanding integrity too. When she arrived at her shop, Mama Yabo from across came over to discuss the event of the day with her. While they were talking and speculating as to what would happen next, I go get am for you arrived. He went up to Teju and pulled her by her left breast. She spontaneously slapped him hard across his face. He let go of her breast, and Mama Yabo was so shocked that she stood there with her mouth wide open at the audacity of the man. He announced to Teju, I have heard all you said about me and all your accusations. I am not going to deny or admit anything. You and all these stupid market women cannot run me out of town. I am not going anywhere. Your king and your police chief cannot touch me either. I am here to stay. And as for you, with your wild eyes and sassy attitude, I will have my way with you. I told you before, nobody says no to me. And if you don't come to me in the next few days, you will be sorry. That half-breed child of yours will disappear. Go and tell all your sisters in the market that they haven't seen anything yet. I am going to be king of this place. He finished and calmly walked away. Mama Yabo started to wail at this point, and the other market women who were their neighbors started to run down to them again. Teju was dumbfounded. All she was able to say to herself was, he threatened my child? The man threatened to harm my child? She repeated to herself. She started to cry. She was terrified. The other women started to question her and Mama Yabo, but she didn't answer them. Mama Yabo continued to wail hysterically and to tell the women, I go get him for you, said that he would kill the young Ireti. The 4-year-old Ireti was at home with her grandmother, who watched her sometimes while Teju was at the market. Teju, through her tears, tried to close her shop, but there were too many women in there to console her and to talk to her. She walked away from the women and walked the mile to her parents' home, where she still lived with Ireti. She found Ireti on the streets where she was playing with the neighbors' children. She grabbed her, and while she was still crying, hugged her to herself. Nobody threatens my child and gets away with it. I will personally kill this man, she vowed. Ireti started to wipe her mother's tears with her eyes. Teju threw the child onto her back, tied her in place with her wrapper. She took her gele from her head and, tying it firmly around her, held Ireti in place on her back. She walked into the house and told her mother, who had been alarmed at seeing her in tears, that I go get him for you threatened to kill Ireti. Bosse tried to reassure her that the man was bluffing, but Teju knew that the man was serious. She told her mother that she would personally deal with I go get him for you, but that she wanted Ireti out of town and, if possible, out of the country to ensure her safety. Her mother repeated that she was overreacting to a bully's threat. I don't think so, mother, she informed Bosse. He will do it. I believe him. The man is evil. I felt it the first time I saw him. I am not taking any chances with my child's life. She left her mother in the house and, with the child still secured on her back, went in search of the principal. When she walked into his office that afternoon, a thing that had never happened before. He knew that something was seriously wrong. He believed her when she told him that the man would hurt Ireti, and he took the threat as seriously as she did. The principal knew about a man's desire to want to possess Teju, and he knew that a man with a mean streak would do anything to get her. He also did not want to take any chances with his daughter's life. The love he had developed for the little girl was unbelievable to him. And each time he was with Ireti, he thanked his stars for the moment of lapse in his judgment when he slept with Teju. He and his girlfriend had been talking about a trip to England, and he had not been back in almost 40 years, and he decided that it might be time to go taking Ireti with him until things calmed down in Iroko. He told Teju this, and she hugged him out of sheer gratitude. She was on her way back home when she realized that the principal would take Ireti away with him without her there. "How long will I have to hide my child because of this criminal?" she asked herself in frustration. "I have never run away or hid from anything in my life, and I am not going to start now. I am going to raise my child in this town, and my child will be free to go and come as she pleases. No man will deprive me of this. I will see him dead first," she vowed to herself again. Teju's father took the threat very seriously. When he arrived home from work, he too knew very well the effect that his daughter had on men. He phoned his sons, who had made their lives in different cities where they worked, to inform them of the situation. They, being very protective of their sister, were very angry that somebody would dare threaten her and their niece. Kende, who was a major in the army, promised to investigate the gangster and find out why the chief of police was acting out of character. They promised to come down to Iroko over the weekend to deal with the situation. 2 days later, which was a Friday, the principal left Iroko, taking Ireti with him. Teju had spent the previous day in Ibadan, where she obtained an emergency passport for her daughter. She had also been crying nonstop since the threat on Ireti's life. She cried her hardest that Friday morning when the principal and his girlfriend came for her. They planned to be gone for 3 weeks. She did not know how she would survive the separation from her daughter. Her mother had continued to tell her that she was making a mountain out of a molehill, but Teju ignored her. Kende arrived shortly after Ireti and the principal left. He brought with him a lot of information about "I go get am for you." He was indeed a gangster who had come to Iroko to hide out. That was why he married Teju's neighbor in the market. Iroko, being a small town, was a good place for him to hide from some people who were out to kill him. He had been involved in a fight between 2 big mafia bosses in Lagos. He had killed his boss's rival's daughter for him, and the other mafia boss named Big Daddy, who lived in Ajegunle, got to know about it, and that was why he skipped town. If he had been smart, he would have maintained a low profile in Iroko and nobody would have suspected a thing, but apparently it was too difficult for him to hide his character, Kende concluded. The chief of police in Iroko was aware of this, but his hands were tied pretty much because his superior officers in Lagos had made it clear that "I go get am for you" was untouchable. After he gave his parents and Teju this information, Bosse started to cry. She finally realized that the threats on her granddaughter's life were not empty ones. She hugged her daughter and apologized for not taking the menace seriously. Teju, who had spent the 2 previous days crying, dried her eyes and thanked her brother for all the information. Kende told his sister and parents that he would go back to Lagos and see what he could do about the man. "It is not simply acceptable to have that monster in town," he concluded. In the meantime, all the women had closed their shops and refused to sell anything in the market since the men were still walking around freely. On the part of "I go get am for you," he seemed bolder and was seen around town more often than before. He enjoyed all the commotion he was causing and all the attention from the people of the town, who were now obviously scared of him. Many of the women told one another that they saw him coming out of the police station many times, and on other times they saw him chatting and laughing with the police officers on duty. The following day, which was a Saturday, Teju woke up very early in the morning and knocked on her parents' door. She informed them that she was leaving to go to Lagos and visit with her best friend Kika for a while. Since Ireti was gone and the market women were on strike, she would use the time as a vacation. Her parents felt that it was a good idea, and Bayo was especially relieved. He had been afraid that I Go Get Am For You might come after his daughter and assault her one way or the other. He had even suggested that she go with Ireti and the principal to England, but Teju had refused, telling him that she would not let a bully run her out of her town. Since her brother gave her all the information about I Go Get Am For You, she had resolved in her mind that rather than for her to be afraid of him for the rest of her life, she would have him killed. I haven't done anything to hurt anyone, and I will not live in fear for the rest of my life or let anyone bully me into having a relationship with him. My body and life are mine, and I will be in charge of them and of my daughter's life until she is ready to take over that function for herself. Teju had resolved that she would be as good a mother to her child as her own mother had been to her. Bosse had taken care of her willful child. She had protected her from ridicule and harm, and as much as she could, she had stood behind her daughter in all situations, trusting and supporting her. When it all looked as if Teju had given into the pleasures of her body and would become promiscuous, Bosse had a serious talk with her when she was 17. She had explained to Teju that her body was hers to do with as she pleased, and that it was obvious that she loved sex a lot. It isn't a bad thing, her mother told her at the time. In fact, she stressed to her that it was a very good thing, and Teju was a very lucky person to have derived so much pleasure from her body. But she had told her that she had to be responsible about it. Always use condoms and don't sleep with married men had been Bosse's only caution to her daughter, and she has supplied her with condoms. And Teju had slept with some married men up until then, stopped after that, and always used condoms. Teju realized she was a very lucky person to have been born into her family. She knew that she had frustrated her parents a lot of times, but they had always loved her and supported her. She wanted to be the same way for her daughter. She arrived in Lagos later that day, and when she got off the bus, instead of proceeding to her friend's apartment in Yaba, she got on another bus and went to Ajegunle. That was the seat of the mafia boss who wanted I Go Get Am dead. She did not have his address, but she was sure that somebody would point her in the right direction. Big Daddy was born in Igbo-Ileri in 1919. His name had been Ajao. He had completed secondary school education and moved to Lagos, where he started to work in a cement factory. He rented a room in Ajegunle. He did a lot of menial jobs to make ends meet in Lagos, which was a very expensive city, and his room in the slum parts of Ajegunle had been the best he could do, and even then it had taken the bulk of his wages, that he barely had enough money for food or to send home to his mother. He had gone without food on many occasions, but always sent money home to his mother. At the age of 25 years, when he had been in Lagos for some 7 years, his mother, beloved, became very ill at home. One of his sisters sent for him. He borrowed money from a loan shark with the promises that on his return he would repay the money with interest, but he did not want his mother to die. His father died when he was 13, leaving behind 8 children. He was the oldest and the head of his family. He felt responsible for his mother and his siblings, and the fact that he had not become rich as he had hoped on moving to Lagos was a source of pain and humiliation to him. He took his mother to the hospital to try to find out what was wrong with her, and between paying for the doctors, the traditional healers, and the cost of medication, the borrowed money ran out within a short period of time. He returned to Lagos and went to another loan shark to borrow more money, using his secured job at the factory as collateral. A lot of the men he worked with did that, and the loan sharks would come to the factories on payday to get their payments. He had an understanding boss who promised him his job back on his return. His mother did not get better, and she eventually died, leaving him in debt. to the tune of some $3,000 at a time that his wages were only $20 a month. After the funeral, he returned to Lagos with two of his youngest brothers, who had become his sole responsibility. He approached the two loan sharks and made payment arrangements with them. It was obvious to them that he would be indebted to them for the rest of his life. He had lost his room in Ajegunle with his long absence because the landlord rented it out to someone willing to pay more money for it. So on his return, he had become homeless as well. He moved in with a colleague of his at the factory and started to squat with him. His colleague charged him and his brothers the same amount of money he had been paying when he had his room, even though they had to sleep on the floor on the porch in front of the friend's room. Every week when he received his salary, he would pay the amount he and the loan sharks had agreed to send them. He agreed to pay the loan sharks the amount of money, and then he would send some money to his siblings back at home, and he and his brothers would live on what was left, which was not much. They lived like this for 5 years, and he enrolled his brothers in schools, determined that they would have good education and go on to college and break the cycle of poverty. The older of the brothers did not have much interest in school, preferring to run the streets, and he would get into trouble from time to time, while the younger brother was very studious, and in spite of the unfavorable conditions of their lives, did well in school. He became the hope of the family. The older brother eventually left home and joined a gang on Lagos Island. He started to steal and was arrested by the police on several occasions. Ajao did all he could to guide his brother in the right direction, as he took his responsibility as the head of the family very seriously. By the time the older brother was 20 years old, he had been in jail many times. The fourth time he was released from jail, Ajao decided to send him back to Igbeoleri for him to live there and farm, away from the attracting glitters of Lagos life. The brother refused. By this time, Ajao had been able to rent a room of his own, and he and his younger brother continued to live there. And shortly after this, at the age of 37 years old, he got married to a woman he had fallen in love with. His younger brother graduated from high school, passed his examinations very well, and applied to go to the University of Ibadan. He was accepted to study medicine, but the big problem was that there was no money for his tuition. They applied for scholarship from the government of the country, but he was turned down because the board claimed that they had already met the quota of the scholarships that were given to Yoruba people that year. Ajao asked them why the clause the Yoruba people. After all, his brother was a citizen of the country, but he was told that they had a quota system for the different ethnic groups in the country for scholarship. The Yoruba people always used up theirs since they sent all their children to school, but the other ethnic groups hardly ever used up their quota. He asked them to give his brother one of the other group's quota, and they refused, unless his brother could prove that he was from the other ethnic group, which he could not. This made him very angry. Ajao, who still owed the loan sharks money from when his mother was ill, approached these loan sharks again for the money to send his brother to university. With his and the brother's assurances that on his graduation, their money would be paid in full, they were granted the loans, and his brother enrolled in the university. Ajao continued to be angry at the injustices in the system, but he was confident in his little brother, and he knew that he would come through and make their lots better. His brother did as was expected of him and graduated from the medical school 5 years later as a doctor. He got a job at the General Hospital in Lagos as an intern and started to earn an amount of money Ajao never believed that a single person could ever earn. He was very proud of his brother. Within 2 years of becoming a doctor, the young man cleared all of his brother's debt, and for the first time in his adult life, Ajao was debt-free. He was 45 years old at the time and a proud father of 2 daughters. He loved his younger brother with his life, which seemed finally to be calming down. He moved to a better part of Ajegule, away from the slums. He enrolled his daughters in school and impressed the value of education on them, constantly citing their uncle as an example. They listened to their father and did well in school. His other brother had continued his life of crime and had become a notorious armed robber in Lagos. The police were not arresting him anymore by this time because he had moved up in the hierarchy of the organization and could afford to pay them off. His family stayed away from him and he from them. However, the situation took a tragic turn for all of them. 3 years after Ajawo's brother became a doctor, when the criminal brother ran into him at a party. It had been to celebrate the wedding of one of the doctor's colleagues. The two brothers, who had chosen different paths in life, came face to face with one another after 5 years. The criminal greeted the doctor and told him that he had heard a lot of good things about him and he had a business proposition for him. The doctor warily returned his brother's greetings and told him that he was content being a doctor. He was not interested in any business proposition. The criminal asked him if he was too good for his own brother and did not want to be seen in public with him. The doctor denied that idea. They parted ways and the doctor thought that that was the end of that. The following Monday, while he was in his clinic, his brother walked in unannounced. The proposition I have for you, which you cannot refuse, is that we want to retain your services for us. You will treat members of our club whenever we need medical attention, and you will help us import some medication from Europe. The government will only give a doctor license to import the medications, the criminal told his brother. The doctor looked at his older brother, whom he loved very much, while they were growing up. His brother had taught him a lot of great things and had protected him in a lot of situations. He wondered why he chose this life for himself. He had become very wealthy by stealing and extorting money from innocent people. He wondered how he could live with himself. What club? He asked. And the reply was simply, I'm sure that you understand. What medication are you importing from Europe? He asked him again. His brother told him that all he needed to know was that they were importing antibiotics. I am sorry, I can't do either. Like I explained to you, I am satisfied with my work as it is now, the doctor told his brother. You cannot refuse. I was instructed to tell you, people who say no to my boss die. It is for your own good. You cannot say no to my boss. Well, go and tell your boss that I just said no to him, the doctor answered his brother. 2 days after this discussion, which the doctor did not relay to anyone, 4 men came to his clinic, bringing 2 men who had gunshot wounds to different parts of their bodies. The doctor was ordered to take care of them and not make a report to the police, as he should in such circumstances. He suggested that the men were too ill to be treated in a clinic and that they should be in the hospital, and they refused. He did the best that he could to patch them up, and the men were taken away. The following day, the men who had brought the injured men came back and at gunpoint asked him to come with them. He did, and they took him to their boss's house. The injured men were there, and one of them had a high fever. The doctor explained to the boss, whose name was Babaeko, that the men needed to be in hospital to undergo surgery and be on intravenous medication. He explained that he did not have the tools to care for the men in his clinic. Babaeko asked him for a list of the equipment he needed. He emphasized that the men must not die. One of them was his nephew. The doctor gave him a list, and the following day they came for him again. A room in Babaeko's house had been converted into an operating room. The doctor performed the surgery to remove the bullets from the men's lungs and abdomen. They had a very stormy time, but they recovered. Babaeko offered him a large amount of money as thanks, and the doctor refused the money. He realized that he was in serious trouble. He agonized for weeks. Finally, he went to Ajao and told him of his plight. Ajao, though enraged, did not know what to do. He knew that he could not go to the police because they would not be able to help him. He thought of it for a long time, and finally he decided to go to his old creditors. He concluded that they would know what to do. They knew what to do all right, but they could not do a thing. They advised Ajao to tell his doctor brother to go along with Babaeko. He was a fearless man, they told him, one of the most powerful men in the underworld in the country. Ajao felt trapped, like his life had gone back to when he was in poverty, enslaved to his creditors. He feared for his brother's life. He had been a good child and had grown up into a good man, studied hard, pulled his family out of poverty, and gave all of them a ray of hope as to the future. He had become an incentive to his nieces and nephews, all of whom took their education very seriously and did well in school. But his good-for-nothing brother was going to drag everybody down again. The doctor did become enslaved to Babaeko. They continued to make him provide medical services for any of their gang wounded in armed robbery, which had become a very common occurrence. Innocent people were often attacked in their homes, and when they traveled on the freeways from one part of the country to another, most of their victims they killed. The doctor could not tolerate what his life had become, and each time he as much as showed signs that he would not cooperate, there was the usual threat on his life. The last straw that broke the camel's back came in 1965, when he was asked to sign for some medication to be imported. He was told that it was antibiotics, but he knew that they were not. His suspicion was confirmed. It was heroin. When a week after the medication arrived, the powdery form in the capsules was removed and carefully repackaged. That night, he hung himself in his home. He had just turned 30 years old. He left a pregnant wife and a 2-year-old son behind. Ajao became hopelessly depressed and stayed in bed for 3 months. He emerged from his depression one Saturday morning, left his home, and went to look for his older brother, the criminal. He asked him how he could have done what he did to his own brother, who had never done a thing to hurt him in his life. It was bad enough that he chose a life of crime, but why drag his brother into it? The criminal, who had been sobered by his brother's suicide in a way that he did not know that death could have affected him, did not say a word to Ajao. He sat there and looked down at his feet. The following day were confusing ones for everybody, but Ajao's visit did set some sort of action in motion. The criminal's body was found 2 days later in a canal in Lagos Island, and Ajao had to identify the body of his second brother to die that year. A week later, the wife of the pregnant doctor was found dead in her bedroom. Her throat had been slit. Her toddler son was asleep beside her when the maid went to wake her up for the day. Ajao went to the police. For all it was worth, he felt like justice had to be served. Someone had to pay for all these. There were laws that had to be obeyed. The police gave him the runaround for several weeks. They asked him to return for one appointment or the other with one detective or another, all of which went nowhere. Finally, after about 3 months, they told him that the case was closed, they were not getting any leads, and it was wasting everybody's time. As Ajao was leaving the police station on that day, one of the police officers walked out to him and slipped a piece of paper into his hand and told him that he could go there for help. Written on the paper was the name of a man most feared in the neighborhood of Ajegunle. He knew of him as everybody did. He had been his creditor's boss, and if anyone would make sure that justice was served, he would. Ajao went to the man and told him his story. The man asked him why he did not come to him in the first place instead of the police. Ajao, understanding by then how mafia organizations worked, apologized for his foolishness in not coming to the right person for help. 2 days later, Babaeko and a lot of his men died in a big fire that consumed his headquarters on Lagos Island while they slept at night. The doors had been barred from the outside. Ajao returned to his benefactor and thanked him. Thus they became friends. By this time, Ajao had lost his job. What with his depression and is running around to get the police to arrest Baba Eko, he had missed a lot of days at work. His benefactor gave him a job doing odds and ends for him, mostly coordinating operations which had to do with revenge and avenging wrongs that were done to people, both real and imagined. Ajao told his boss that he would not steal or have anything to do with illicit drugs. But if anyone had been unfairly treated, he would help them get their revenge, and his boss respected him in this. There was not enough of avenging ill treatment of other people that could bring his family back, but Ajao could not get enough of it. He became somebody that was feared and respected at the same time, and he gradually grew in the hierarchy of his organization. On the death of his benefactor, he was crowned head of his organization. He still refused to participate in robbery or illicit drugs, and his deputies branched out of the organization to set up theirs where they could do these. Ajao was able to make money as a businessman by getting government contracts from many people in government whom he had helped avenge one wrongdoing of the other, and so he became a rich man. The grateful people he helped started to address him as Big Daddy. That was 10 years ago. The day before his oldest daughter, having graduated from the University of Lagos, where she studied engineering, moved out of the house and into her own apartment, she was found dead in her bedroom on a Sunday morning. Big Daddy was devastated again and knew that his enemies had a lot to do with his daughter's death. He set up his own investigation and was able to trace the death to Baba Eko's son, who now headed his deceased father's organization on Lagos Island. He had been a young man at the time of his father's death, but he had waited patiently for his revenge. He had done his homework and knew that his father was killed at the time to help Big Daddy. He knew how proud Big Daddy was of his daughters, both of whom had been well educated and were any father's pride, and so he had the older one killed to avenge his own father's death. I Go Get Am For You did the honors, and when he was identified to Big Daddy, he skipped town. So we're going to stop here tonight at page 108, halfway into the page, and we'll continue from there. So we're going to label this 4A. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to the reading of Our Mother's Sore Expectations by Kehinde Adeola Ayeni. And if you are interested in purchasing this book, you can buy it. All you have to do is send an email to kehindeayeni26@gmail.com. Again, touch kehindeayeni26, and it's spelled KEHINDE, Kehinde Ayeni 26@gmail.com. Her first name and her last name. And I appreciate you for tuning on my channel. And you can subscribe to my channel, and you can take a look at the other videos, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3A and 3B. Now we have 4B. Have a good evening and a good day and a good afternoon, depending on when you tune in, or a good morning. Bye for now. Ciao.